There are some really fantastic academic journals around education that management education researchers contribute to. You know, we chat sometimes about journals like Studies in Higher Education. With the journal that we launched with the Higher Education Academy, we were much more focused around being a practice-based journal, and I think that was probably one of the issues. You know, we can't escape things like research excellence frameworks and all that kind of stuff, and I think it's almost inevitable, or it certainly was at the time. Impact is now seen as being much more important in the ref, so there might be a change there. That practice-based journals have a lot less, in a sense, intrinsic academic or extrinsic academic value as well in the profession, and in terms of meeting those particular metrics and those particular measures. So it's always harder to get. You know, it's back to that kind of issue earlier that whatever your research, if the research isn't is seen as not being kind of not meeting those kind of the standards of something like REF in terms of 4-star and 3-star and 2-star and so on. And for practice-based journals and practice-based research, I think it can be quite hard to meet those kind of standards. Then it's always going to be difficult to convince people to submit their papers to it. When there's a whole bunch of more academic, theoretical journals that welcome those papers with open arms.
It's also interesting that when I review papers for the Academy of Management, Learning and Education or the Journal for Management Education, you know, what their policy is around what people should submit. And on the one hand, they don't necessarily want the sort of small scale, like you said, this is what I did in my classroom once and this is how it worked, even though it's very practice oriented and sometimes, you know, very creative as well. They're more interested in how is what you have what you have researched over time, let's say twice, 3 times, has changed the practice and therefore has a societal impact, which then probably goes into that area of impact ref, etc., etc. But isn't it also that these little things, these small-scale projects and insights that we gain also can shape and change internally, obviously, what we are doing. So dismissing them and only looking at the big stuff, what are we missing out, you think?
I think there's probably a whole lot of innovative and interesting practices that actually require more research and require more experimentation and require a better evidence base. You know, it's that kind of academic issue of replication that really matters, that I can do something in the classroom that might be hugely successful, but whether that success is because of the particular group of students that I had at the time, whether that success is because I've actually got some really whizzy and exciting and innovative new practice, whether that success is because of me as a teacher, whether that success is just a product of luck. When you're dealing with kind of individual experiments, it can be quite difficult to find that more generalizability from them. And I think one of the places for those kind of more practice-based research is actually to open up avenues for investigation, for people to pick up on what may be small-scale innovations and run with them themselves, so that actually you can try and replicate, you can get something that's more generalizable through lots and lots of small-scale experiments that might have built up. And I think that sits really neatly in terms of, I did a paper with one of our profs, Andrew Lockwood, a few years ago, where we talked about organic approaches to building excellence in teaching and learning. And what we meant there was the idea that what you identify are where the pockets or the islands of really good practice are, and then you find ways of letting people know about those pockets of good practice, which I think practice-based journals are a really good way of doing that, and takes it from a kind of institutional to a more sector-based level. But then finding ways of joining different elements of good practice up. What I think you always find if you look at institutional level good practice, then what you find is that Professor X and Dr. Y and someone else are all doing great stuff, and there's always similarities between the great stuff that they do. But because there's no obvious or immediate mechanisms for sharing that practice, you've got a lot of replication taking place. If you then expand that to the sector level, there's going to be huge islands of excellence across the sector. Practice-based journals, I think, can be really useful in terms of identifying some of those excellence and providing a mechanism to create, whether it's communities of practice. And now we can do that in a kind of digital, technological way that we couldn't have done 10, 15, certainly 20, 25 years ago when I started my career.